Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Tolin. I'm a mind-body coach and I help people recover from chronic fatigue, chronic pain, and other symptoms that are caused by the brain and nervous system. I'm excited to share a really impressive recovery story with you today. Chrissy Zmijewski is a world bodybuilding champion. She was in peak physical health when she fell ill with a series of viruses and developed what we'd call post-viral syndrome. Chronic fatigue, breathlessness, brain fog, aches, lots of sensitivities to food. Chrissy finally recovered when she rediscovered the work of Dr. John Sarno. If you're not familiar with him, he wrote about the mind-body connection and how the brain creates physical symptoms when it's under psychological stress. And sometimes we get stuck in that stress symptom loop until we figure out what's going on. Chrissy made a remarkable recovery and has so much insight to share, so I'm excited to dive right in. Chrissy, great to see you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, for the invite. I'm really looking forward to chatting.
Well, it's a testament to all your hard work because I know as part of your recovery, you were actually imagining doing a recovery story interview. And congratulations, you made it.
Yeah, I got my goal, right?
Great visualization. So it sounds like you actually had a long history of mind-body symptoms now that you understand more about TMS. Just give us a brief rundown about what some of those symptoms have been all the way back to your childhood.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I look back, you're right. It's like I thought that I had lots of, health problems growing up, but it seems that all of them fit into the TMS category. I had digestive issues, ranging from reflux to irritable bowel, constipation. I had sleep issues and lots of fatigue, sensitivities to foods. I had headaches and TMJ pain. And, I went to lots of doctors, got lots of tests, took lots of medications as a kid. And, my symptoms, got worse or better at times, but, there was never, the doctors could never pinpoint what exactly was wrong. And, like you said, as I learned more, it seems that it kind of all boils down to this TMS, these symptoms and, stress and, underlying emotions were more the cause than any physical factor in a lot of the symptoms that I've had for, 30 plus years.
It's amazing when you start connecting these dots. And just for people who aren't familiar, I'll mention that we say TMS all the time, and that was a term John Sarno coined, Tension Myositis Syndrome, which just really refers to this mind-body connection. And it's really a classic sign that it is a mind-body symptom when doctors can't find any pathological cause. Well, now if we fast forward a number of years, so back in 2019, you started developing these viruses. What happened at that point?
Well, I had just finished my last competition and won the world championship. And, I had a great high in my life, right? I accomplished yet another one of my goals. And I was just like, I fell ill with a virus that lasted for about 8 weeks. I had chills, body aches, fatigue, and I was sick for about 8 weeks. And then, I started to recover, and then it would come back about 6 months later. And this happened over the last 3 years until last year when it was the worst it had ever been. And that's when all those other symptoms you mentioned started really kicking in. I had earaches, I had face pain, itching all over my body, brain fog. My heart rate would race up to 175. And as an athlete, my resting heart rate is in the 40s. So having a heart rate that high when I'm in bed is just, like terrifying. And then my throat started closing when I would eat certain foods. My mouth started swelling. It was weird. I would get these sensations like when you go to the dentist and the Novocaine's wearing off, my face would get all like tingly and numb, and then my lips would swell up and bleed. It was just like my whole body was like, kind of revolting, and I didn't know what was going on. And more symptoms just kept appearing. And, just when I thought I would get it under control, I would have interstitial cystitis pain. And and then I would have like reflux again. And it was just like this, it just, I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on, but it was just like every system in my body was just saying, I'm done.
Absolutely. It sounds so miserable and terrifying. And I just want to point out, as we all know, a lot of people are experiencing similar symptoms right now with long COVID. And when I had chronic fatigue syndrome, there was a lot of similar symptoms. So um, just to sort of clarify, since it was during these years of the COVID pandemic, you weren't sure whether it was long COVID or the flu and just some kind of post-viral syndrome.
Right. Well, so I work from home. And so when I got sick, because I've been having these symptoms, on and off for the past 3 years, not to this degree, I just kind of chalked it up to, well, here we go again with a new variation. But I didn't have some of the same, loss of taste or smell. And since I work from home, I didn't get tested. So I can't prove one way or the other what it was. But either way, I've heard that a lot of viruses, whether it's Epstein-Barr or COVID or, just the flu, some people's bodies tend to have this like long haul syndrome where their body is just constantly battling a high viral load and they develop symptoms. And so I was like, well, either way, I have a really bad symptoms that are just not clearing up. Whereas most people, after a couple of weeks move on and don't have those symptoms anymore.
Absolutely. And I've done quite a bit of research on this and found that actually a lot of asymptomatic people have high levels of Epstein-Barr and all these other viruses. I know that doctors told me were causing the symptoms, but I've really come to believe this is just the state of the nervous system when it's, dysregulated, hypervigilant, and there's all these psychological stressors. That's the underlying cause. And viruses may be at play, but they're, in many cases, not causing symptoms. Now, in your case, I mean, here you went from being a professional athlete, winning the world champion, and now you're breathless, just washing dishes. It must have been such a radical shift. What were you thinking and feeling in that time?
Well, the last 3 years have been really hard. I mean, I, went from working out hours a day, which, unless you're competing is way too much. Like, I don't recommend that for a normal, person just wanting to be fit. But like, I couldn't even do a 10-minute workout without like being exhausted for several days. And so it was really mentally challenging because it was like, this is this is so different, like you said, from what I was experiencing before to what I'm experiencing now. And it was kind of like brought my morale down. Like, what is going on? Like I was like a poster for health, and now I can't even I can't even do daily life. And so, and coupling that with, I retired. So, that's a huge change. Like I didn't have, my whole life was structured around competing and eating and sleeping and working out. So I had that change. Then my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And amidst the pandemic, I'm flying back and forth across the country to be with him for his chemotherapy treatments and try to spend as much time as I can with him before he died. He did pass away. And then my mom broke her back twice and had to have surgery. And I'm like trying to deal with this across the country. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. So while all this craziness in the world is going on, I sold a house, moved across the country, bought another house, live in a completely different environment, which, in some ways reduced a lot of stress, but it's just like my world kept changing and changing. And so while I'm experiencing all these symptoms, I also have this like baggage of stress that I've been, carrying with me. And because so much stuff kept coming up, I don't think I ever really processed it before, I experienced these symptoms to this degree. It was just like, just keep going, just keep pushing. You have other people relying on you to, be there for them. You don't, don't make them be a burden for them. And so I just feel like, my body was kind of screaming, like, you need to stop. And when it finally got really bad, I did.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you have just named like every kind of emotional trigger that people go through that's really high up on the list. I'm just so sorry for your loss and everything you went through in that time. And I don't see how you could have all processed it emotionally because there was so much coming at you. And we see really with these mind-body symptoms that there's always these emotional stressors before the symptoms come on. And we so much look to the physical, like what's the physical cause and what's the physical cure, because these are real physical symptoms. So in your case, what did you do to try to get better in those early weeks?
So when I first got the symptoms in 2021, I was just like, maybe just like the other ones, it'll just take a couple of months for me to recover. And when it had been 2 or 3 months and I'm still breathless, just walking around my house, I was like, I need to figure out something. And some doctors were just like, oh, you probably just have, like some viral symptoms. It'll clear up. And then when I started having the throat closing and all these other things, I was like, no, you need to run tests. I went to an ENT. I did have an ear infection, but urgent care ruptured my eardrum. That healed, but I still kept having ear pain. And I would go into my ENT and say, please, I have an infection again. I don't want my eardrum to rupture again. Please take a look at it. And she's like, nope, your eardrum, it's clear there, there's a little scar tissue from the rupture, but it's fine. They looked down my throat. There was no swelling. I got blood, like every blood panel imaginable done. And, a few things, my vitamin D was a little low, but other than that, everything was in normal range or, in ideal range. And it was just like everything in the medical and I even did an EKG and my cardiologist was like, everything looks fine. And so it was like, I kept looking for the physical cause. And, because like you said, these symptoms were painful. They were real. I had blood in my urine and nothing to show that there was anything wrong, no infection, no bacteria in my system. And so it was like, well, I can try to keep going and trying to find another physical symptom, or I can look at what else was available. And that's kind of what led me down this road again was I've exhausted all avenues. And so it's, I'm not going to beat my head up against the wall. I'm going to look for something else.
Absolutely. And I know that on the one hand, it can be so exasperating when doctors say there's nothing wrong, we can't find anything, because there's something wrong and you want a cure, right? On the other hand, once we learn about this mind-body connection, I mean, it's a real blessing because we realize there's nothing physically wrong. This is generated by the nervous system, the way the brain is processing stress, and then there's something we can really do about that. So for you, what was really your pivot? What started to turn things around? You said you started looking for, another way.
Yeah. So I had gone into a bunch of food sensitivity groups for like histamine intolerance and salicylate intolerance, because it seemed every time I ate one of those foods, that would trigger a reaction. So I was looking at what these people were doing, and other than supplements and other things, which I was reacting to, so I couldn't do those. A lot of people were saying, look into limbic retraining. And I was like, well, I've studied neurology for the past 7 years, so I'll start looking at that again. So I looked at a bunch of limbic retraining programs and eventually started Googling or in YouTube, put in like long haul limbic retraining or nervous system. And that's when I found the video that you did with Dan. And then I found a couple other videos. Dan did one with a guy named Jake who had long haul. And then you did an interview with Sarah Rainwater, and she had recovered from long haul using this TMS approach. And I was like, well, I studied this like 20 years ago, but when I read John Sarno's book 20 years ago, it was for back pain. And I, got over my back pain with his approach, but he hadn't really come out with these, other symptoms that might be linked to this mind-body approach. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I remembered the personality profile, and I was like, I fit all of those categories. I was like, for me, this is not like this is my normal stress, but maybe my body is like not happy with this anymore. And so when I heard your stories, all three of you, I was like, yep, I relate to all these people, and their symptoms sound very much like mine. Maybe this is me too. Like this is a mirror, and maybe this is the path I need to investigate. So I pretty much told myself I'm putting down all of the other things I've been trying and sticking to what I know from I had been doing with my neurology work and incorporating this TMS stuff, and I'm going to give it a shot. Like, I doubt it's going to make me worse. And if it doesn't make me better, then I can go back to the medical approach and see if there's something else I missed.
It's really amazing how this approach is often spread peer to peer, because although there's lots of science and there's peer-reviewed studies, most doctors aren't trained in this. Very few doctors are trained in this at all, certainly not in medical school. So it's sort of shared peer to peer, and I'll link that interview with Sarah Rainwater. But I also had a breakthrough in a similar way where another woman told me her story from post-viral syndrome, and I was like, oh my goodness, that could be me. I can recover. And it opens this new possibility. I think for you, you had an advantage too, because you had embraced Sarno's work for back pain at least years before. And I feel like you applied your like really disciplined training to this approach, but you also brought in lightness, which we'll get to a little bit later. So give us an idea of kind of what your protocol was that really turned things around for you.
Yeah. So like you said, I did take a very diligent approach, and kind of just dove in. And that's kind of how I do things. I either kind of tiptoe or I dive right in, and sometimes overdo it. And I did a little bit at the very beginning, but it was just kind of like, that's just kind of my personality. So at first I did a lot of journaling. So journaling, I think, was probably the key thing. And, if you look at any TMS work, most people recommend journaling in one form or another. And I did a bunch of different things. So one thing that kept coming up again and again was look at the stressors you've experienced in childhood, adulthood, and your personality traits that make you stressed. And I looked at different experiences in each of those categories and just started journaling about the ones that have brought up like a lot of anger, and a lot of because I don't like to be angry. So I tend not to like focus on it. But I realized that I had a lot of stress that I had and anger that I hadn't processed. And that's why I said I feel worse for a little bit, because as I just kept journaling about all these things that were bothering me, it was cathartic, but it also just, it's just overwhelming. And so I noticed my symptoms went up a little bit. And so I journaled probably 2 or 3 times a day, because I didn't want to wait. If something stressed me out, usually I'm just like, whatever, like move on with your life. You got things to do. And I was just like, nope, get out my journal, 10 minutes, journal it out. And then I was able to move on with my day and not carry that, that stress or that heaviness with me. But I did notice that journaling that was very stressful for me. And, I was crying a lot every day. And so I eventually had to flip the script. And after a couple of days, I would journal out my anger. And then I would say, how could I see this differently? Was my perception right? Because our perception is key, right? Our perception is what tells our story about everything. Like, there is no one truth. I have a story about this experience. You have a story. And some of those probably link up and some of them are probably different. And so I had to tell myself, like, part of why I'm probably in this situation is that I perceive things in a certain way that cause more stress to my body. So could I perceive this in a different way? Did this person really mean to hurt me? Or were they going through their own stuff and couldn't see that how they experienced the situation was painful for me? And so it doesn't excuse the behavior, but it allows me to go, I don't have to carry this anymore. I don't have to feel this emotion towards them. The hurt was already there. I'm dragging it out by continuing to feel it now and to hold on to it now, rather than saying that was not okay, but I don't need it in my life anymore. I can still be happy. I can still move forward, and I don't have to have it be part of my identity. So that was the big part of my journaling every day.
Yeah, I just love how you personalized it based on what you needed, and really to highlight that you were able to get to that point of understanding and possibly even forgiveness. What I'm hearing is because you just kind of let out the emotions in this uncensored way. And that is something John Sarno talked about, is really just letting it out, because we have this repressed rage. We want to be good people. We're not even aware it's beneath the surface. And sometimes just like allowing the free expression of that emotion lets it move up and out. It doesn't make us an angry person. It actually relieves that pressure, right?
Yeah. So that was key. And then I really wanted to embrace, because when you're in pain, you're not feeling good. It's like, it is, I mean, just being alive and going through life is heavy. And so I was like, how can I also focus on the good things, right? Because like, I have been through a lot in the past couple years, past couple decades, but there's a lot of great things in my life. And again, that perception, if I can look at, I can look at the flower or I can look at the mud, right? I can choose which part of the picture I want to focus on. And so I would really make sure the end of my day was about my wins. And sometimes my wins were really small when I was feeling bad. Like 2 blueberries was a win, eating 2 blueberries, because blueberries had caused physical reaction, or I thought had caused physical reactions in my body. Or one day I was able to do 8 push-ups, and I was like, I haven't done this in so long. Like, that's a win for me. And so part of it was just looking at, like, if I was coaching someone else, like, how would I would encourage the little things, not like this huge thing. Like, I still had symptoms, but I was focusing on the little wins and then what I was grateful for at the end of the day. And I got to a place where I was really grateful for this experience, because I recognized that without it, I wouldn't have changed my life. I would have continued with the same stress, the same personality, like letting that personality of perfectionism and trying to be overly responsible, like let that drive me. And, I would continue to feel the way I had felt for years.
There's a real wisdom in these symptoms, and sometimes when you get to the point where you just feel a little bit better, that can open up, especially because you were saying you just kept going and going and didn't have the space to process the emotions. And so, yeah, our body's also giving us signals like slow down. And one way to do that is by really moving into the body. So you can do that work with journaling and with kind of the higher language centers. But the body's so important, right? Because that's where we actually store and feel emotion and trauma. So you also were doing somatic meditations every day. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I downloaded your audio track online, and you have a very soothing, calming voice. And so I was just like, it just helped me experience what I was experiencing without the fear. And I think that's key, right? Like, when I was exercising and my heart's beating really fast, I was like, okay, no big deal, right? But when I'm sitting or laying in bed and my heart rate's doing that, it's terrifying. But I could also go, but I'm safe. Like, I had enough experiences showing me that although the symptom is not comfortable, I'm safe. There's nothing bad. I mean, other than just momentary, not feeling great, I will get past this. And so that really gave me a lot of comfort, because I think a lot of the symptoms I was experiencing, a lot of it was just fear. Like, what does this mean? Like, am I dying? When your throat is closing, like, it's like, this doesn't feel right. And so being able to be in this meditative state, or this, like, relaxed state where I'm looking at the symptoms, but not attaching to them, not giving it any emotion, was really empowering. And it allowed my body to feel safe, to kind of bring my sympathetic nervous system down a notch and go, okay, not the best thing I want to experience right now, but we're cool. It'll be okay. Just give it a few minutes. And usually that was all it took. Sometimes it was longer, but I was able to get to a place where I was okay with it. And then even if the symptoms did come up, I was able to just be more at ease with the whole experience.
That somatic tracking actually does grow new neural pathways and shift and retrain our brain. It's amazing, because we're so used to kind of pushing away the symptoms and just being in our head about them, like they're a certain diagnosis. But when we come into the sensations of them, they're heavy, they're hot, they're buzzy, they're aching, and we can just watch them mindfully and feel them move through our body, it really does retrain the brain in a powerful way. I know that was a huge part of my own recovery. Now, with this approach, education and the knowledge is really important too, because we're being told constantly, look at the shiny objects out there, right? Look at your diet, look at these physical findings. And so it's important to immerse ourselves in this new understanding. It's really a new paradigm in many ways of realizing that a certain subset of chronic symptoms are real, they're felt in the body, but they're caused by the brain and nervous system. So what did you do on the education front?
Well, I was trying to get into a study that you're a part of at Harvard for long haul. And so I was staying away from books because I think that would have disqualified me. I didn't end up being a part of the study. So I jumped into the Curable app. And that was really helpful because it has 4 little pieces. It has education and brain training, which reminded me of all the neurology stuff I had been learning for years. It had meditations. I usually focused on the somatic tracking and like gratitude meditation. So I didn't do their meditation so much. And then they had journaling exercises. And so I liked it because you could select from a menu of what you wanted to learn. And I felt like, the education and the brain training were really good reminders. And then they gave me like little nuggets. So like the pep talk was one of my favorite. And it's basically where you just write out this thing to your brain. And that was good for me because I wanted to thank my brain. Like I know the thing that a lot of people think is my brain is malfunctioning. Now it's not my body, my brain is malfunctioning. And it's like, no, your brain is protecting you. Like that is its purpose. Like it's there to keep you alive. And so it's creating symptoms to keep you safe. And it thinks it's doing the right thing. So basically the pep talk was telling my brain, you're awesome. Like, I really appreciate how much you've looked out for me, but like, I got this now. Like I can, I know I was scared. I didn't want to take care of those, feelings and emotions, but like, I'm okay. And I don't need you to do this. Like, I want us to move on and I want us to have a great life. And so can you chill out a little bit? And so that pep talk was really helpful for me to just, at first it felt silly, but then I was like, no, this is what my brain needs to hear. Like it needs to hear like, thank you. Like, it doesn't need to hear that it was doing something wrong. It needs to hear like it was trying to help, but now I don't need that help anymore.
Yeah, when we work with ourselves, with our physiology, and realize that underlying intention, that the brain on the subconscious level is literally just scanning for danger and has a perception of danger. And so it's mobilizing you into that flight, fight, freeze response so you can escape the tiger, right? But then you're speaking to it in this kind, light, and sometimes it sounds like even fun way. So you're working with yourself to retrain the subconscious mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And part of that too, I think, was really envisioning that there is another possibility, right? Like, because for a long time, I was just like, I tried everything. I tried every supplement, all these different things. And it was just like, I still for years had these symptoms as I can't think of something right now. Right. So like, I still get moments of brain fog where I'm like, I don't even know what I was saying, but like, I can laugh at that. Right. And I think that's huge because especially people with this type of personality that develop these types of symptoms tend to be very hard on themselves. I'm a recovering perfectionist. And so like, I had to be okay with not being perfect all of the time. And, so I had to envision what that would look like. And that's really hard to do when you have so much pain. So like we talked about at the beginning of the interview, part of my recovery, I think one of the exercises in the Curable app is envisioning a different future. And so I couldn't not think about my symptoms. I didn't want to talk about them, but it's hard not to pay attention to the things that are happening in your body. So I would talk about them in my mind in the past. So I was having the interview with you or with someone, and they were interviewing me about the symptoms. And I was saying, I had this symptom, and this is what I did. I journaled now, and then I added on this exercise. So every day I was rehearsing that interview, but I was talking about my symptoms as if they were a past part of me, not a current part of me. I hadn't fully scoped out what the future of me was going to look like, but the goal that I wanted to get to was this interview so that I could show other people there is a way out. And so I knew once I got to that point, I would have a more wide open future, but I had to get to that interview. So that rehearsal of those symptoms allowed my brain to focus on them because it was kind of scared to like let it go. But I was telling them, my brain, these symptoms were in the past and this is how we overcame it. We did this, we did this. And so I think it kind of was telling my brain, like, this is our path forward. And so I used the Curable app, that kind of rehearsal, and then I used videos. So the recovery stories were crucial at the beginning because it made me see other people had done it. So it was possible for me too. Maybe like, it's like you have to try it on, like because it feels really scary. Like, okay, I don't know that that's possible. Like my symptoms are nuts, but like if other people had gone through a lot and recovered, like it might be possible for me. And then once I knew it was possible, I put the recovery stories aside because, everyone talked about how long or how short it took them. And I didn't want my brain attaching too much to that. I just wanted it going, I know what I need to do. Now let's do it because I'm tired of these symptoms and I want to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it sounds like you gave your brain all these constructive things to focus on, because when we're in that flight fight state, we are running, and a lot of times we just keep running into things that aren't helping us, that are scaring us, the Facebook groups or whatever. So that's so brilliant that you gave your mind just enough information. And then this creative task of visualizing this recovery interview, and here you are, and you are helping other people, I have no doubt. So it still gave your mind kind of something to chew on. Now, something else you had done that's not necessarily part of TMS is these neurology exercises that you had done years before for your training, and you did bring into your recovery from the post-viral symptoms. Can you just give us like a brief understanding of what that involved?
Yeah, so I originally started studying neurology about 7 years ago because my husband had chronic pain and wasn't recovering from, even after having surgeries. Sometimes his pain was worse. And I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like I've been in the training industry for a long time, like injuries heal. They shouldn't keep hurting. And so when I started learning about like phantom limb pain, when people would not have a limb and still have pain in that limb that was no longer there, it was like, maybe the key is in the brain. And so that's when I started learning about like pain reprocessing and all of these different ways to target different areas of your brain or calm down certain areas to get you out of the fight, flight, or freeze response so that you can be more parasympathetic. Because I think that's a key for people with TMS symptoms, is that we tend to be in that sympathetic mode too much, when ideally, like, our life, we're supposed to be like, we're not always running from a tiger. We're supposed to be relaxed. And typically perfectionists and people who are very driven tend to be more sympathetically dominant. And so what I learned about was this threat bucket, or, you could call it a stress bucket. And our bodies know how to take care of things. But when the bucket gets too full, it starts expressing itself in different pain symptoms, whether that pain be depression, anxiety, post-viral things, all the things that people tend to like don't have a cause, can't pinpoint what that cause was for that symptom. So I focused on a lot of breathing and vision work to calm my system down and to tell my body it's okay.
Yeah, that's also true for me, that I found extended exhales really calm the nervous system. Even just watching the breath can calm the nervous system. It's different for different people. And something I found really interesting when we were chatting earlier was you describing the way looking out at a horizon or looking somewhere in this relaxed way is very calming to the nervous system. That's also part of some work from Peter Levine, where he describes kind of orienting around your environment and getting into the senses is really calming to the nervous system, which is really the opposite of what we're doing when we're scrolling on media or we're just fixed on the computer screen, for hours on end. So what did you find that could be helpful for people that are, like frantically looking on social media or just spending a lot of time on a computer, because many of us work on computers, that may be helpful?
Yeah. So, and that's really important to recognize, is like our physiology, our mind can create stress responses, but how we use our body can also create stress responses. And so with people on blue light devices, which, computer, TV, phones all the time, that is stressing our nervous system out. And then convergence, taking our eyes and focusing in on one spot, that's very stressful too. So a couple of things. One is, obviously limiting exposure to the devices, getting off them, if giving yourself like, this is how much time just like people do with their kids, you can only be playing video games for this long. We kind of need to do that with ourselves too, because we work on devices, and then we also socialize on devices. So if we can limit that amount of time so we can actually interact with another person would be ideal. And then also limiting it at night, because it's very stimulating to the brain, which can impact sleep, and then, have a spiraling effect on people experiencing symptoms when they're not well rested. But eye exercises are super helpful. And the easiest thing people can do is go out in nature, because in nature, you're always changing the distance you're looking at things. You're looking at things up close, you're looking at things in the distance. And that change, we have eye muscles all around our eyes. And when we're in convergence, we're overusing some and underusing others. So by changing the distance of the things we're looking at can be very helpful. Also, nature is very healing. There's research that shows that when people are recovering in hospitals, those who have a window that show, trees outside versus the building next door, they tend to recover faster. And if you can't see outside, if you don't have a window, then you want plants. Like you have plants all over your office. Like having nature around you is, the body can feel very supported, and healing happens faster. So being outside accomplishes two things: vision and being out in a natural surrounding. And then another one is just eye exercises. You can just take a pen and do a clock. So you're taking your eyes in circles. So you're using all of your eye muscles, and it kind of just gives your eyes a break from focusing in and, focusing very narrowly. Because like you said, when we focus, and you were even telling me that story when I think you saw a wolf or a coyote, it's like when we feel threatened, our eyes go zoop right to the threat. And so if we're doing that all day to work, even though we don't think we're under threat, we're telling our brain, because of how we're using our eyes, there's something wrong here. I'm very stressed out. And so even if you're doing all the TMS work, if you're not breathing right, or you're not, you're doing this convergence with your eyes all the time, you're telling your body you're in a state of stress, and it could impede the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. It's also, it's the knowledge and these set practices, but I've found throughout the day just to do very simple awareness practices as you're living your life to be so helpful. Whether that's, I like looking out my window because I have trees, so it is looking in the distance, just feeling my seat and my feet on the floor, or watching the breath. Any of the things you mentioned, they can be kind of woven into the day, and I find that is a lot more effective. And something else. So, okay, obviously you had this structured protocol, and you were doing all these practices for a shorter period of time because you started seeing results. And people always wonder, how long did it take? And even for me, I like to say I'm recovered and recovering, right? Because there's always things that come up and you learn new layers. But for you, when did you really see a shift where you was you felt like, okay, I'm back to myself?
Yeah, so I was doing the neurology. So I would do breathing, vision work, and some work for the vagus nerve before and after each meal. And so I would get it in, like you said, little breaks, because I wanted my meal times to be as relaxed as possible, since those were very triggering for me. So those 3 weeks that I was doing that helped my nervous system calm down, but I was still experiencing symptoms. That's when I found the TMS work. And for about 10 to 14 days, I was doing a lot of journaling, education, meditation. And after that 14 days, I was pretty much symptom free. And that's then when I started incorporating the food and exercising again, which added stress. So symptoms came back, but I needed to get my body where I was feeling very safe before I started doing those other things. So I would say about 14 days, no major symptoms, and then adding stuff in, which unfortunately cause symptoms, but I knew the tools to work with. And I think that's really important for people to remember, is that just when you get back to life and get back to living, like, just life is stressful. Like, you turn on the news and something new is happening that's impacting our daily life, right? So you have that plus all of your normal stuff that goes on. And so it's okay that symptoms come back, but that's why you have the tools, because now you go, okay, I know what's going on, and I can address it. Like, one day my lips just swelled up and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I had been several weeks without any symptoms. Like, what is going, and I was just like, just go journal. And I just journaled and I journaled. And usually at that point, my lips would have bled and it would have been days for them to recover. And after I got done journaling, I went back to the bathroom and I was like, okay, they're back to normal. Like, this is so weird, but it shows that it's okay. The symptoms can come up. And that was just good evidence for me, like, not to react and just go, what either is going to happen, is happening, or did happen that is stressing me out. Let's think about it. Let's process it and see if that makes the symptoms decrease or go away.
And that makes all the difference, right? Because the fear is the fuel for the symptoms. And so when you have what we call, and Alan Gordon describes as, outcome independence, where you have your practices, so you can start challenging your triggers, you can start doing the activities you want to do that are going to cause symptoms, whether it's eating a certain food or going on a trip or working out longer, but not reacting to that and telling your brain, I'm okay, because that's really the point of power, where then you're retraining the brain in the midst of this activity. I'm not worried about it. So the brain's picking up, okay, she's not worried about it, it's okay. And eventually that will subside. And so it sounds like you dove into eating foods that were causing symptoms, because I know at one point you could only eat about 7 foods, and even going on a trip. And talk a little bit about the ups and downs, because sometimes people hear these stories and they're so inspired, but they're like, oh, well, I tried it for 2 weeks and it didn't work for me, so I guess this isn't the approach for me. But that's not the case. You know, it really takes persistence, and we all have ups and downs, because we still have those old neural pathways. And when we kind of go into that old neural pathway, it can feel like you haven't gotten anywhere, but you have, because you're growing these new neural pathways. So what was that process like for you of engaging in your life again on your own terms?
Yeah, it was ups and downs, but I had to remember, like, one, like, I have to stop searching. And that's what I would recommend, is sometimes it's like, I see on a bunch of forums, what books should I read? And it's like, if you know it's TMS, like, and you found something that seems to work, or that is, starting to work or clicks with you, dive into it and do the work. Because it's easy to get lost in the rabbit hole of searching, whereas the results happen from doing the work. Just like, I had clients who were like, I need to find the perfect diet. Nope, you just need to move more, eat a little bit less, and it will be magical, right? Things will happen. And so sometimes, like, that is the key, is that you have to do the work, and you have to do the things you don't want to do. Like, I'm not going to tell you that meditating is always easy or enjoyable for me, because my mind's a little monkey. It likes to jump around. But it's like, I know that's what I need to, like, calm my system down and then be able to be effective in my life, because I can't run on hyperdrive all of the time. So sometimes the thing that is going to be the most helpful is the thing we are most resistant to, because it's uncomfortable and unfamiliar.
Well, and it kind of reminds me of what you were saying about a child. Like, it's almost like you have to say to a child, no, you cannot eat that cupcake before dinner, right? Because there's a part of us that's like really scared, that has all these emotions, that's kind of out of control, that does need like a safe, confident container. And the part of us that is our, I call it a loving adult, that comes in and says, look, like, we need some discipline here for our own good. But it's not coming out of fear, and it's not coming out of beating ourselves up. It's actually coming out of a place of compassion. It's like, I don't want you to suffer any longer. So here's what the medicine is this for you, this kind of protocol you put together that you knew was right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I questioned, I mean, I'm not going to lie and say, every day I knew I was making progress. Some days I was mad and I was like, I feel horrible. I'm doing the work. I still feel horrible today. And so, I let my mind have its little temper tantrum and then got back to doing the work. And I think that's the key is like, you cannot let, we all trip and fall. We all have good days and bad days, and you can't let the bad days derail you from moving forward. And so I think that's where the wins were really important, because I'd go back and reread my wins, and it was like, okay. And then I would reread where I was like a day or two ago or a week ago. And then I'd be like, okay, I'm not there anymore. So there are things happening. And and it's again that perception. I can either focus on what's wrong or the progress that I'm making or the things I'm enjoying now that I wasn't before. And so I had to keep reminding my brain, like, it's the lens you're looking through. And which lens do you want to look through? You can have your temper tantrum, but then we're going to change the lens we're looking through.
Yeah.
And incorporating, like we had talked about previously, incorporating play and having fun, because that above all, I think, tells the brain you're safe when you're playing. Like, animals don't play if they're nervous about being eaten. They play when they feel safe. And so the same is true for us. If we feel safe, we laugh, we have fun. And the more I think I started to allow myself to do that, it was okay to have a bad day because I was still having fun for parts of that day.
Absolutely. And also not making it mean something that, you're a failure, right? What I'm hearing is that you understood this is part of the process. I'm showing up, I'm doing my best. And so I'm really glad you brought up the lightness and the play, because we lose sight of that inevitably when we're feeling so horrible, and it feels urgent and intense to suss out these symptoms. But John Sarno actually wrote about the rage to soothe ratio. And when we're doing soothing activities, it does calm the nervous system. And now there's this huge body of work showing, how play and laughter calm the nervous system. And of course, it makes sense, right? Because like you said, you're clearly signaling you're not under a threat. For me, I had a huge turnaround when I just started doing really simple things I could enjoy, like writing poetry and being in nature. So for you, but I know it can be tricky when you're feeling awful. So how did you bring in lightness and play when you still had all these symptoms?
So that's interesting. The first, and I would just say it's baby steps. Again, the brain likes to do things the same. We brush our teeth the same, we make our bed the same. And so if we start saying, okay, we're not going to focus on pain, we're going to focus on fun. Your brain's like, I don't know, no, that's not what we're doing. Like, that doesn't feel safe.
It's
So
like, this is urgent. You don't understand.
I can't laugh and smile. Like, we're dying here. We got to focus on that.
Yeah.
So at first I would just smile, and it was a fake smile, but I knew from stuff I had read in the past that when you actually just make yourself smile, your brain cannot stay in this like funky state for long. And so I would just smile. And after a while, it became real. And the other was like a power pose, like, the superhero pose where you put your hands on your hips. I remember I was in exactly. I remember I was in a clinic, and I was getting ready to get some blood work done. And I was really nervous. And I was like, okay, you're going to be fine. I was like, so I'm like reading something against the wall and like trying to be discreet and doing my power pose. It made me feel empowered, right? And so again, those little physiological things we can do with our body to trick our minds into not being stressed. So it started that way. And then I would watch funny animal videos with my husband, because that's one thing we love, just watching, animals being silly and whatever. So we would do that. And then I just noticed one day I'm like making dinner and I'm laughing and had the music on, which I had sound sensitivities. So I was not listening. Like, I always had the house silent. And I was like, wait a second, like, I'm listening to music and dancing while I make dinner. Like, this is just totally not like the usual Chrissy. And so I knew at that point, like, I was giving myself permission to have fun. And I wasn't even thinking about how am I having fun. I was just looking for, what do I want to do? And so I just started to incorporate those things into my life.
Yeah, and it is amazing how you can experience joy and laughter and all these things even with symptoms. right? And you start realizing, like, oh, I can be at peace, or I can feel joy even with the symptoms, right? Like that doesn't have to shift for me to, quote, get my life back. And that alone is really healing, right? Because it takes off some of the pressure of like needing to make them go away, because that fighting the symptoms keeps us in that fight state.
I think that's where journaling was really helpful, because I think one of the reasons, and I don't know if this is true for other people, but that I was focusing on the pain and the symptoms is because I never let myself feel the emotions. And so the symptoms were my way of holding on to those hurtful feelings without actually feeling them. But when I was allowing myself to feel those feelings, it was like, okay, I processed that. I allowed myself to feel that. Now I can go have fun. I can enjoy myself too. And so I feel like the journaling is for some people, very underrated, but important part of what really allowed me to let that piece go and move forward.
Yeah, well, I mean, the pain and the symptoms are emotions, right? So it's literally just expressing in a more sensory way rather than an emotional way. And when you acknowledge and honor and feel the emotional aspect, there's no need anymore for the brain to keep creating these physical symptoms. And, it just also makes me think of acceptance, because I know we've talked a bit about both acceptance and self-compassion are also a really important part of this process. And I know they have been for both of us in our healing. How did that come in for you? Did it take a while to get to this point of accepting the symptoms and finding compassion for yourself?
Yeah, it did. Because some of the journaling I did was anger at myself, because I'd studied this for so many years. I've been through this, in various degrees for decades, and it was just like, when are you going to learn? and like, stop stressing yourself out. And so it took a while, but it was just like, okay, like, beating myself up is not going to help me. Like, I've already experienced pain. That's my penance, right? Like, I don't need to drag it out anymore. And I was like, I have compassion for other people. Why is that so hard for me to do for myself? But and it's a work in progress, but I did notice that once I was able to just be gentle with myself and, have compassion when I have brain fog and can't remember what I'm saying, like, it's okay. Like, I'm not perfect. Other people aren't perfect. And it really just let me off the hook, because I put myself under the microscope, and I had to for competing, but it's like, I don't have to do that anymore, like, and I don't have to do that in my personal life, like, I can be good in some aspects and let myself be okay in others. Right. And I think that was just, it was freeing for me not to feel like I have to be perfect about everything.
Yeah, this has a way of softening some of those personality traits, which a lot of times we get positive reinforcement for being very meticulous and hard driving. But it does have a flip side, which is like, putting that internal pressure on us, which can manifest in symptoms. And then as you get the lessons, the symptoms really lessen as well. So you've covered so many great things. What would you say would be some of your top tips for people who really are struggling with symptoms, whether they're post-viral symptoms, chronic fatigue, pain, brain fog? We've both dealt with interstitial cystitis, IBS, digestive issues, any of these mind-body symptoms. What would be some of your top tips?
So like we chatted about a while ago, is just doing the work, finding some, everything that someone says may not ring true for you. And same for this interview. You may not like some of the tips here, but find what rings true for you and then apply it. Because that's doing the work is where you're going to see results. And you're also going to find out what doesn't work. And so you can let that go. Like, there were some things that didn't work for me or didn't work at the time, and I had to wait till later to incorporate them. But if you don't do it, you don't know. So that would be my first tip. And then the other would be watching the language you use. Like, I really tried hard not only not to talk about symptoms, but not to call them mine. It wasn't my pain, my fatigue, even my TMS. Like I did not want to identify it with it. It was something that was my brain was creating, but that's not me. And so I think, that the somatic tracking really helped me disassociate, like that is something I'm experiencing. It is not mine. It is not me. And so just looking at the language you use, not only about your symptoms, but just about life in general, how you structure your life. Like I had structured my life that I couldn't go out for too long, or where it was too loud or too noisy or smelly or too bright with bright lights. Like I had really structured my life like there was something wrong with me, like I was very fragile. And so it was like I was reinforcing to my brain, like, you're fragile, people have to be very sensitive around you. And it was so I started that whole interpretation thing, like when loud noises were very startling to me. And so I would hear loud noises and I'd be like, oh, it's okay. I'd have to remind myself. And so I would say, when you're experiencing symptoms or things that are triggers, tell yourself you're okay. Because like you said, if you tell yourself you're in pain or this is something to pay attention to because it's scary, your brain's going to keep creating that startle response when that trigger comes up.
Yeah.
And then I guess finally, I would say, recognize the strength that you have. So many people are just like, I'm so broken, or whatever word they put in there. And it's like, to get through the day with some of these symptoms is a feat in of itself. It's like you need a medal just for like making it through the day, let alone taking care of your family, having a job, all the other things. And so I think if you can start to embrace the fact that your brain is protective, it's very strong. So if it has the ability to create some pretty intense experiences, it has the ability to heal those experiences and to create a pretty awesome life. And so the more you can just keep reminding yourself, like, my brain, I'm going to use it to work for me and for this new life that I have, because now I'm safe. I don't need protection anymore. I'm safe. And my brain is strong. We are strong. I think it's such a more empowering interpretation to take on this situation. And it's so true.
It is so true. I feel like going through 13 years of CFS was the hardest thing I've ever done, and overcoming it as well. And I'm hearing that with you. It's like, here, you're a professional athlete. You were a world bodybuilding champion, right? But there's certain parts of going through this journey that is more challenging. So we're rock stars.
That's right.
Anyone going through these symptoms, right? And we can harness that. And like when we harness the brain's ability to shift and perceive that there is safety, it can free up a lot of life force that, our nervous system's been using to kind of hold down these difficult emotions.
Yeah, it's almost more freeing and easier to feel good than it is to feel bad. Like now that I feel good, it's like, it takes a lot more energy to feel bad. Like I still have days that are less, energetic or whatnot. But yeah, it's so much more freeing. And I hope this helps other people see that the possibility is there. Just do the work, believe in yourself, and believe in your strength.
Chrissy, you are so inspiring. Thank you for doing the work and imagining this interview and offering this to people. I know it's going to be so beneficial.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Such a pleasure. So if you want to find out more about mind-body healing, there's other videos on this YouTube channel, and I also have blogs and free resources on the work of Dr. Sarno, Dr. Schubner, and other people in this mind-body field on my website. There's also a couple free somatic tracking meditations that Chrissy and I were talking about, so you can try them all there at RebeccaTolin.com.